Well, I think initially, before I knew Tom at all, I was very involved with the Indians in Winter, South Dakota. And anyway, my dad was in the post office business and started running a big one in Winter. And then a lot of the people, the Indian people, wanted to go to mail things and so on. They were so happy because this was a very small town. And the other people that were involved in the post office thought, what in the world, we can't have those kind of people come into our post office, or because nobody else will come in if that happens. And my dad just made it be. If you don't want the Indians to be there, you go away. And he was that kind of a person. And when some of the people would come and say, how can you stand it? And he would say, why shouldn't I be able to do that with anybody else just like you? And he got a lot of people very angry at him.
And
Yeah.
for him to defy other people in that town was a very, very rare and dangerous thing to do. But he did it.
Yeah. And he got me involved, greatly involved, with worrying about those kind of people. When they started coming to my school, I thought, well, this is great, you know, we'll have a lot of fun. Well, it wasn't a lot of fun because most of the other kids didn't believe in anything in the Indians. So I made it an absolute, I don't know how to call it, a company or something. And there were like 4 or 5, including my sister, that demanded that we were able to do things for the Indians that they weren't going to do. And finally, one day I went down to the major porter, I can't remember what his name was, that was the owner of this particular school. And I said, listen, I think you're going to be really involved if you can let the Indian women and girls and boys come to your school, because then nobody can say you don't pay any attention to these people. Well, he finally decided to do it, and it ended up just frantic at first, and then all of a sudden, all the other kids picked up what I had picked up, that these are really fun kids. And in fact, they had me come and say, why do you think they're doing this? And I said, because they're no different than anybody else. They all want to have fun and have good minds. I was Yellowhead. That's who everybody called me. Yellowhead, come on over here and play or whatever. And the other kids who hadn't been around the Indians couldn't understand. What do you mean, Yellowheads? And I said, I love it. So
Billy Jack came about as I was back trying to court her to marry her. I wanted to marry her. And we didn't have refrigerators in those days. She and I are a little bit older than you. And so we went down to the ice house to get ice for the refrigerator. I mean, for the ice box. And we're driving through all these tar paper shacks and abandoned cars up on wheels with robes around them, and this massive village of people. And I asked Dodie, what the hell is this? How can these people live in this heat, this Dakota heat, and these Dakota winters? And she said, that's Indian Town. And I said, what? She said, people are living in there? And she said, yes. And we then went to the church, the Methodist church, where they had put an old pipe outside, and that was a shower for the Indians. An outside shower. And I said, I can't believe this.
yeah.
So she was waiting for a messenger to come to tell the world about the cruelty of the natives. And I came along and I wanted to go into film. So that was what I went back to the motel where I was staying, and I wrote Billy Jack. She then would take the pages and tear them up or cross him out. And we wrote Billy Jack, and it took us 17 years to get money to make Billy Jack. Yeah. 17 years. And she was telling me all of her stories. Like, for example, she worked for a year as a deputy county auditor in Tripp County, even though she was just out of high school, because she was that smart. Then her brother-in-law, who later became her brother-in-law, took me downstairs to the Pheasants Bar, and he told how they would follow the wagon of Native Americans with their food and their allotments out of town, because they were in their little horse-drawn wagons, and they'd stop them, and they'd beat them up and cut them and take the flour and cut it open and pour it over their heads and say, "There, now you're white, now you can go shop in the store." Now, that became the big scene in the store in the movie.
Simple solution is simply to make Miss Upyour's non-white friends white.
All right, all right.
As for the little one here.
Hey! Stop it!
There now. Everybody is white.
Everything in that movie happened more or less to Delores when she was growing up in Winter, South Dakota. And that's how it came. So she and I joined forces. I found the cause, and she found the messenger. I was trying to look for my costume for Billy Jack. And I was put on different kind of hats and stuff, and I did. And Halloween, Halloween night, our daughter, Teresa, who was in the film and sang her song about her brother being killed in the war and all of those things, which she wrote at 10 years old, she had blonde hair, and Dodie came home from the dime store with a felt native Navajo-type hat, and to protect her hair from the egg throwing that the kids did at Halloween night.
Which was quite a lot.
Yeah, and I said, "Ah, that's the hat for me." And she said, "That's ridiculous. You look," and my two kids said, "That you look ridiculous in that hat." And I said no. I had to have that hat. So we got one made for me, because there wasn't any. And now, years later, when we get Andy Vidovich, who comes to, Andy's son had been a flying tiger in Chenault's Air Force. And Andy was proud of him. He was dead now, but Wovoka was dead, who was his father-in-law and his mentor, and his wife was dead. And he was alone. And in Nevada, in Elko, he had been in an explosion of a water heater, and 80% of his body was covered and burned. And he was given up for dead, absolutely dead. And he wanted to die because his son was gone, his wife was gone, his father-in-law was gone. He wanted to die, and he hungered to die. And one night at his bed, his wife came. Now remember, she's dead. This is her ghost. She comes and sits at the edge of his bed and said, "No, you can't die yet. It's too soon." And she says, "What? Why is it too soon?" He said, "Because your message will die with Wovoka. Unless you get the message out before you die, his message will be gone forever. So you can't die until you do that." So he has no idea how he's going to do this. And a couple of years go by, and then he gets this call from me. And he didn't understand movie, he didn't know feature film, he didn't know what I was talking about on that phone. But he knew this was his call. So after he shows me the picture and I see that Wofoka is in my hat, which is his hat, and I couldn't believe the coincidence after any event. And he flew there without knowing what this was about. And he said it's because Wovoka wants me to get his message out. The ghost religion swept the plains at the time of Wovoka and caused the massacre at Wounded Knee and all the rest. And he met with Sitting Bull, Wovoka did, and told Sitting Bull that if you betray this, if you use this for war, because this dance, he developed a special dance. And this dance enabled you to cross over to the other side and walk with people who had gone. And that would include Christ and everyone who went behind you, before you. And so he said, if you use this for war instead of peace between the two, you will die at the hands of your own people, and your own people will suffer more than any other. Well, both things happened. Sitting Bull went back and used it for war, got killed by his own people, and his Lakota tribe is the poorest tribe in the country. So they all happened.
How old are you?
13.
Get out.
Billy Jack kills young Bernard with a karate chop after being shot. Now in our business, that means when you get punched or shot or something, you gotta fall back, you gotta act like it. Well, Billy Jack in the scene, if you see the movie, he doesn't take the hit, he just stands there, looks at him and says, how old are you? And so Craig Carpenter, everyone in my crew, my cameramen, my stuntmen, everyone said, you gotta take the hit, you gotta take the hit. And Craig Carpenter said, no, you're practicing the ghost religion without knowing it. It became clear to me that Wovoka was using us to get his message through to today's youth. And in the movie, I have a scene that Dodie and I wrote, which says,
the whole spiritual wisdom of the great holy men of the Indian tradition is now what the young people of the world are looking for. The young whites, they know there is a supernatural world and a great spirit, and they try to reach the great spirit. They try by drugs. They are made to do this because their religions no longer believe in the other world. Heaven is not out there. The other world is here. The great spirit, Messiah, the Christ, are here in this pit. Your people, my loved ones. There is a thin veil separating us from them. The whites do not know how to reach through that veil. They do not have the belief, and they cannot touch their loved ones or the other spirits.
and that's exactly true. That's why Andy Vidovich came there. And there's a series of books out in the 70s by a guy named Carlos Castaneda, which were very big spiritual, about a Native American who in a khaki suit and khaki hat was the medicine man, the great medicine man. And if you look at our film, I'm doing a dance Andy Vidovich showed me how to do, which was the exact dance Wovoka did. Natives are dancing around me in the circle. And when I'm directing myself, I have a rule. Nobody may say cut but me. Nobody, because there may be times I don't want to say cut. So I said, okay, let's run this, and I'll go ahead, and you'll do the dance around me, and I'll be Billy Jack getting the dance. And as you know, there's 10 minutes of reel on a film, and I finally said, hey, isn't someone going to say cut? And it had been cut about 5 minutes earlier. The film had run out. But I didn't say cut because I was in a trance. The dance actually put me in a trance, and I was stunned. And Dodie, who was sitting outside, and if you look closely at that scene, and there in the top of the kiva stands a little man in brown khaki. Andy Vidovich. He was there all the way. So we did that dance, and then he told me, don't worry. In fact, when I went into it, I said, what am I going to say when I come out of the vision? You got to tell me. Dodie and I have to write it. And he said, no, just trust the Holy Ghost. He'll sit on your shoulder, and he will tell you what you want to know, what you should say to the children. So whatever I say in Billy Jack is what came out of that dance and that trance. The scene, we kept it in the picture exactly as it happened. And I don't know what I had to see the film to see what I said because I didn't know. And so that was a major teaching. That was Vivoca's teaching. And of course I was deeply influenced by Rolling Thunder and Craig Carpenter. Now, years later, the picture's out, it's a huge success. I get a call from him at Christmas time, in which he said, scholars are coming from all over the world to write about the ghost religion and Vivoca. There's one right here from London. They're all over the world. And a week later, the sheriff calls me. And he's died. He went on to his peace. So he got to do what he was there, and the ghost religion and the truth about the ghost religion and what happened at Wounded Knee and with Sitting Bull all got known thanks to that little hat. I can't help it. It's so amazing. But in any event, he came and the picture became the great success, and Vivoca's ghost religion became huge, and that's why he came. That's pretty mystical. We were out scouting locations. I mean, we haven't even decided where we're shooting yet. And my crew is all white men. Native Americans there was no Native American crew members. And they came to, we were shooting, well, we were looking at this, it was in Prescott, Arizona. And we were looking at Prescott, and just before we had a small airplane, and before we get on, an owl came and sat on the electric light, neon light shell sign. Now, owls don't sit in light. Dodie has real experience with owls, and she's even once had one come down and fly and stop right in front of her.
Yeah.
In the yard. But in any event, they don't, and my crew, all my white boys' crew, saw this as a sign of death, that there's the myth that the owl is the sign of death with natives. So none of them would get on the airplane. And this is where Craig Carpenter came along, and I mentioned this native medicine man. And he came and he said, just wait. And he went out and put his carpet down and smoked his pipe under the owl sign. And came back in and said, it's okay. It's not a sign of death. You can go back. And they said, what is it? He said, this is telling you, this owl is telling you. Now remember, we haven't even begun to shoot the picture.
Yeah.
He said, this now is telling you that this is going to be the most important, influential picture on young people ever made. And you're going to spend 3 years in hell, in unmitigated hell, before it gets released, before it gets out. Now, I dismissed him. He's crazy. We're excited as can be. We're going to get to shoot our feature picture.
Right.
Huh?
Right.
Yeah. And so we go back and we start, and it began. All the problems we had filming it. We got shut down halfway through it out of money when someone tried to cheat us. We got stopped by Warner Brothers. They opened the picture in a porno house and all in the Pussycat theaters. We went through and finally after 3 court battles, Jody represented us in one court battle herself as her own lawyer. We finally, the picture came out in April of 3 years later, and it went through the roof. It was an amazing, and I didn't even know it was 3 years later.
Yeah.
And somebody said, when did this thing with the owl happen at the airport? Jody said, 3 years ago. And we frankly cracked. We just were stunned. And Billy Jack since has become the most profitable independent film ever made. And it sold 77 million tickets at a time. There were 150 million less people in the United States. And today, a Mark Wahlberg, a George Clooney film are lucky to sell 10 million tickets. So that owl knew what she or he was talking about.
Did you get any feedback from the Native Americans about the film?
Oh.
Without question.
What is it called? An avalanche or a tsunami? Amazing. From everywhere. Everywhere. From tribes to Florida to Washington, everywhere. Yeah, we had massive. I had one story. I was lecturing at the University of Houston, and there's a guy sitting in the front row. And when you're a speaker like this, you get to recognize certain people have a fixation on you or something. This man was just looking at me weird. So after it's over, when the people come up and congratulate you and you thank them, and then he's still sitting there, And I can't figure out, what's he sitting there for? So finally he comes up, he waits till everyone goes, and he comes up and he said, here, I've waited for 10 years to see you, not 6 years, anyway. I've waited to see you because I wanted to give you this. And he hands me a ticket to a movie. Just a plain ticket like you get at the box office. And I said, what is this? He says, I get emotional when I talk about it. He said, this is from my wife and myself, and thank you for our life and our daughter. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, the first date I ever had, she's Native American, and she was ashamed of it. She called herself Spanish. She was ashamed, as everyone was. Everyone's afraid of being Native American. Nowadays, it's popular.
Yeah, nothing.
And so my first date with my wife was to your movie. And we saw it, and we were spellbound. And we sat through it again. And I saved this ticket because this made our life. Suddenly, as we left the movie, she was no longer ashamed of being an Indian. She was proud of it. And she spent her life then devoting herself to taking her Cherokee culture, making it, and making our daughter proud to be half Indian. And he said, I knew someday I'd see you, and I'd give you this ticket to thank you for my life, and my wife's life, and my daughter's life.
And he gave you a big hug, too.
So that was the epitome of Native American acceptance. But we got them from tribes everywhere, the Hopi, the Navajo, the Oneidas, everywhere.